You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 95 Podcast. My name is Carolee Culpepper, and I am here with our Executive Director, Dale Sellers. How are you today, Dale?
I'm doing great. Anything fancy happening in your life right now?
Oh, let me see. Nope. We've just gotten over the hump of some sickness in our house. So that was interesting. 2 of us had the stomach bug and 2 of us had COVID. So that was what a time to be living.
Just another day in the life of the Culpeppers.
That's right. But thankfully we are out of the woods with that stuff and everybody's back at school and back to good health and praising the Lord for that. So
that's good stuff.
Well,
you're a family girl, and the guy we have with us today is certainly a family man. He has always been a great example of putting your family first, and really, I just love this guy. We have Dan Nichols with us today. Dan, I guess, Dan, we've known each other for almost 2.5 years now. Is that correct?
Bro, we go so way back, like way back, to pre-COVID.
Wow, we do go back to pre-COVID.
That's an actual lifetime ago.
That is a lifetime ago.
Yeah, COVID years are like cat and dog years. It's like, although it's only been 2 years, it feels like it's been 70.
That's so true.
I'm so thankful to have you on again. I think we had you on in the past, but we've worked together a good bit, trying to work with churches in the Northeast, and we're going to talk some about that a little bit later today. But first of all, take a moment and just kind of tell us who Dan Nichols is, and you recently changed the churches that you were working at, so kind of walk us through that and let our audience know a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm married to my best friend Joy. We've been married for almost 9 years. And starting to do plans for our 10th anniversary now. We're trying to get ahead of the game.
That's us too. We're 10 years this year, and we're trying to
no way out.
Have to get some tips from you where y'all think you might go.
We're thinking Bermuda again. We went to Bermuda for our 5th. We saved up for several years and then did a cruise there. And Horseshoe Bay, Bermuda. We've got to get back to that spot. That was a pretty cool spot.
Okay. I'll have to look into that for sure.
Yeah, but
David's just really wanting to go somewhere where he can just sit on the beach and hang out. So that might be a good thing.
Oh, listen, there's no better place than, I'm not a world traveler. My wife is. She's been to all kinds of countries. I've only been to basically Toronto and Bermuda. Like, that's it. Okay. That's all I've gone to. But so don't take this as like an expert opinion. But when I was at Horseshoe Bay, it was epic. It
awesome.
was epic.
Okay.
And I learned a really great lesson about humility at Horseshoe Bay. So we went on this cruise. We were planning to go on it, and my wife Joy broke her toe right before the cruise. So the whole cruise she was like limping, which we still had a great time, but it was like it was crazy. So we get there, and there's this huge cliff. I'm like, I'm gonna scale this. So I scale it, and she looks up, and I thought she was looking adoringly. So I come back down. I was like, hey baby, did I look studly? And she's like, no, you look small.
Oh.
Because I was so high up, and it was a good lesson in humility for me. So there's all kinds of great things that happen at Horseshoe Bay. Like you can grow.
The Lord taught you a lesson too.
You can have relaxation. So we have 2 kids. My oldest Landon is 6, and he's gone through 3 open heart surgeries, and he's doing great. He's living his life with half a heart. And then my second, Declan, he is 2 years old, and he's a Tasmanian devil just trying to destroy everything in his path as much as possible. So that's our life as a family.
Yep, I feel that. I have a 3-year-old little boy that's pretty much the same. Lots of energy going on there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Declan's a tornado for sure. Grew up in Cleveland, Ohio as a pastor's kid. And Carolee, you're also a pastor's kid here. My dad and my mom are 2 of the godliest people I know. I had a great marriage and modeled for me a very genuine faith, but I saw some of the ugliest sides of church that you could possibly imagine. Too many stories to tell right now, but grew up. I just really hated the church. I actually went to a Bible college hating the church, which was ironic, but it is weird. It's very weird, but God changed my mind. Got plugged into a really healthy church where lives were being changed, got into Acts, saw what God's vision is for his church. and God called me to be a church planter. So we moved I did an internship for a year and a half, moved into an urban setting where we were in a row house with neighbors that included sex offenders, a Wiccan witch, a heroin dealer, a girl who would sleep under the bridge with different boyfriends, a prostitute, and they all lived literally right next door to us. And through the walls, we could hear their conversations. I mean, like I'd wake up at 6 a.m. hearing, I'm gonna blank kill you, da da da. Like that was my alarm clock for a while. Never experienced that before, but God called us to start a church there. So we just Thursday night got some food, invited people over. God took it from there, and God is just continuing to bless. And I turned the church over to my best friend Tim in 2017, and that small little group of 4 has turned into hundreds of people. But I mean, over the course of the last 10 years, thousands have heard the gospel, which is great. I think they just celebrated 147 baptisms.
They did.
I think 147
on Facebook. I
yeah, it's incredible. And they're using the building even this week. They're using it as an emergency shelter for the homeless community in Wilkes-Barre. Just God's doing so many cool things there. I could talk about Restore Church for hours, but God called me to launch the Northeast Collaborative. So I went to do that right before COVID. And God blessed. And honestly, COVID really highlighted the need for Northeast Collaborative. It's a resourcing network where we empower pastors to lead and launch healthy churches in the most unreached, unchurched, post-Christian corner of the nation. Wow. So got that up and running. And then COVID hit. And I said, all right, God, you want this thing to go? And he brought out of the blue a donor who said, we'll do a $63,000 matching grant. And I was like, all right, God, so you want this thing to go? And then my wife, Joy, comes and she's like, hey, with our 2 boys, because basically over the last decade, I spent, because I was fundraising as a missionary and being a church planter. So it was basically like 2 different things and raising up the team, but also all of our support was external so that I could turn the church over to Tim. So I was on the road all the time. And Joy was just like, is there a way that we can get off the road and you still be who God wants you to be? So I'm sitting in my bed with COVID. And like, this is crazy.
That sounds like that was somebody. We've all been dealing with COVID so much now. It's just a person.
he's just like this evil. He's just this evil demon now.
I'll take 2 weeks in August. I thought he was.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Your story from your,
sabbatical.
Your sabbatical stories. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, you're sitting in bed with COVID.
So there isn't a physical person with me in bed. It's just me in there because I'm quarantined with COVID. And I was quarantining like severely because at that point in time, it was really early on and I didn't know how it would affect my son with his rare heart condition. Yeah. So I basically told Joy, I'm like, I'm going to stay in here for 2 weeks. It's going to be hell. And it was, but I'm like, I'd rather go through hell for Landon rather than if he did and he died, I would never be able to forgive myself. So anyway, there had been another church that we had gone really deep with, but God was just showing me that wasn't where we should go. And so I was firing off the no thank you. And it was just this moment where I'm like, man, God, you have to come through for me. I'm like, I know Joy and the boys come first. They need me off the road, but you've wired me very uniquely. I'm like, how am I going to merge these two? Show up for me. I need you right now. And immediately he reminded me of a conversation with a friend who co-founded a search group called Chemistry Staffing. Little plug for them. They're awesome.
Yeah, they're one of our
and they're great. And so Matt Steen, my friend, he just had told me about a church in New York a long time back. He sent me the profile that very day. Joy looked at it, said, this is your bio. Long story short, we're here in Cortland, New York at Grace Christian Fellowship Church. It's a mid-sized church, gone through a lot the last 12 years, but basically we're moving from stabilization to optimization at this church. And they let me bring Northeast Collaborative with. And so here we are. I'm off the road, but God has continued to bless NEC and allowed it to move forward. And it's all his. So just trying to be faithful.
You know, we worked together the February before the shutdown began in 2020. We were with you and we actually did 3 events in 1 week. I was gone.
That was nuts.
I was gone 20 out of 29 days. That was a leap year, 20 out of 29 days that year. And the last place that I was is with you guys for that period of time. But those conferences that we did were so, it wasn't just that they were well attended. They were so anointed and electric, and those pastors came with this real desire to learn. It was a great atmosphere. I think,
and they still talk to me about them, Dale.
It was powerful.
Pastors still talk to me about those two events in Pennsylvania and New York.
That's pretty cool. Talk to us a little bit about what it's like in the Northeast, for those of us who maybe don't live there or haven't been there as much. As far as it's still America, but it's almost like as 95 Network has begun to learn about the Northeast, it's almost like it's another country when it comes to spirituality. Can you kind of give us some understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Northeast is really the front line of where America will head. So like Europe and Canada, right, have become they've moved from post-Christian to anti-Christian in a lot of ways. And the Northeast is really the front line for America in those things. So I think the narrative of the Bible has changed. So like, especially here in the Northeast, it's not that the Bible is irrelevant, is that the Bible is evil. And that's a huge paradigm shift for people. I mean, I think the question in most people's minds are more like, why would you be a Christian? Like they see that the church has failed them so many times, and they're right in a lot of ways. Spiritual leaders have engaged in horrible spiritual abuse and all kinds of issues. And as a millennial myself, I can resonate with that. And especially going through that period of my life where I really did think the church was a joke because of all the inconsistencies and hypocrisy that I saw. But I think for the most part, it's people have not seen Jesus or the gospel for who and what they really are. I think they've seen counterfeit stuff, or people who are failing and they go, oh, well, maybe the real deal isn't the real deal. And I love what Scott Sauls says about this. He goes, Beethoven isn't a bad composer just because someone plays his music poorly. Like if there's a 6-year-old doing a little recital and he's trying to play Beethoven and he doesn't do it well, you don't go, man, Beethoven is, who's that guy? Like it's like, no, the music, God, the gospel, God's design for everything, including sexuality, like all these things are good and great and wonderful. And just because we as followers of Jesus fall short doesn't mean that Jesus isn't the real deal. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do in the Northeast, is try to live and share the gospel in a way that isn't hypocritical, but also is tethered to the essence of the gospel rather than all these extra stumbling blocks that we've put in front. Because the gospel is offensive in its essence, but we have done a great disservice to our nation and our neighbors and our coworkers and our friends and family by putting extra obstacles in front of just the essence of what the good news is.
Making it extra offensive.
Yeah, for things that don't
needs to be Jesus. It needs to be the fact that we're lost, we need to be saved, but not the other stuff we've added to it. So tell me, what is the Northeast Collaborative? Is it just Dan? Is it what is when you name it that? What is it all about?
Yeah, so a little bit of the history. I planted with multiple organizations, but one of them was Project Jerusalem, which was a ministry out of Baptist Bible Seminary. And it was a ministry that would train seminary students like myself through church planting. So it was an awesome program. And they planted 10 churches through this, getting seminary students to take courses and get involved in church planting. And it was awesome. The difference, though, was back then, 90% of the students were on campus. Now, 90% of the students are online. And so everything was shifting. The director, Dr. Ken Davis, amazing mentor, coach of mine, he got stage 4 prostate cancer, actually right when our son was having his open heart surgeries, and right when he was born. So that was a really tough time. But he's been wrestling with that, and he's still fighting that cancer. But he and I started dialoguing about what would it look like to start a network that was separate from the seminary. It was its own kind of Switzerland. It's not tethered to any one church or organization, which it's sad in church land that you have to think that way. But the truth is, churches and Christian organizations get really competitive, and that's not because of God's will. That's because of our selfishness.
We never see that. Never.
But Switzerland was kind of what we were going for in terms of being neutral in its own thing. So yeah, worked for about a year and a half to just get it ready, and then launched October of 2019. And it isn't just me. I have a great admin named Pete Miller, who's on the team, and we have all kinds of resources like 95 Network and other teammates, soul care coaches, Jamie and Julie Overholser. We've got pastoral coaches. We do a retreat with mentor couples, all of it to empower pastors to lead and launch healthy churches. So we have our annual conference, our annual retreat, processing times. We connect the dots for a lot of leaders who are in the weeds of ministry, and either they don't have the time to connect the dots for themselves, or they don't have the connections to actually do all that dot connecting. So we try to provide that. Man, what else are we doing? I mean, those are the main things right now. That's a few things what we do. Yeah.
Do you find pastors discouraged right now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Again, once COVID hit, the need for Northeast Collaborative just rose, and I'm sure you guys felt this with 95 Network.
Oh,
I mean,
we worked harder in the last 2 years behind the scenes without traveling. We've done more than we did before, and which was a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say pastors are discouraged, but what I'm seeing, and I'm not trying to say it's all NEC. I mean, there's a ton of great networks. Basically, I say there's a lot of Geicos out there, right? The big awesome ones like 95 Network and Converge and X29 and all these great ones. We're like Aflac. So if you think of the network land, we're not trying to be another Geico. We're going to be Aflac, right? And I think NEC can provide a lot of what Geicos can't, because at a certain point you get so big, and maybe this will happen in NEC, I don't know, but right now we're small enough to where we can really provide a lot of that relational connectivity and a lot of the, I mean, just even at our annual retreat, like one of the couples that came, they worked with our not only mentor couple but our soul care coaches, and they said, this is the first time we have ever felt heard. This is the first time we've ever felt truly listened to. And they've been in ministry for decades. I think we really need, and it's hard for me because Dale, you and I are wired very similarly. We're very driven. We want to go conquer the world for Jesus. But like in this season, I'm just finding my drivenness needs to be channeled way more into relationships, slowing down, patience, and just being present for people. And it's difficult when you're wired to just go. And in this season, especially with the church that God's called me to, like, this is an incredible church. Grace Christian Fellowship started when Thomas Jefferson was president, gang. 1801. This church has been around for 220 years. So I've started 2 ministries, and then God called me to a 220-year-old church that is not like a speedboat. Yeah. But man, amazing people here. And I'm just finding like the biggest need is to be present and to just ask, how can I pray for you? What do you need? I'm here for you. And it's the same with pastors. And every pastor is different, every story. And some churches are thriving through this. Frankly, I don't know what you guys are seeing with 95 Network, but I think smaller churches are positioned way better than mega churches with COVID. I feel like mega churches in some ways are getting hit big time, and smaller churches, I find in the Northeast, even some of them are doing well. One of our smallest churches, they just told me a few weeks ago, they went debt free through the pandemic. I mean, it's just so yes, COVID has been hard, and I don't want to minimize the struggle because it has been brutal for me too. But man, God's doing great things, and we're seeing lives changed. This morning, Tim just called me from Restore Church, and he was talking about different relationships that he's reconnecting with people that we were ministering to many years ago, and now they're starting to talk about coming back to Christ. And it's awesome.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that people are looking for something to give them hope right now?
100%.
Yeah,
100%. Why can't I call it up now? My COVID brain isn't working. But the C.S. Lewis quote is the C.S. Lewis quote from The Problem of Pain, I believe. Basically, he says God shouts to us in our pain. Like when we're going through suffering, he whispers in all the other times and seasons, but in our pain, he is. And Dr. Crawford Loritz, who little plug for Northeast Leadership Summit, he's coming November 5th along with Dale and the 95 Network team. But he was just talking with Andy Stanley, and he said, yeah, this season is where God is trying to get our attention more than ever before, especially here in America. Because let's be honest, America has had it pretty good. If you're looking at church history and if you're looking at Christianity globally, we've had it pretty good for a long time. And now we're starting to go, ooh, it's getting a little rough. It's getting a little bumpy. It's like, okay, this is what faith is all about, right? Yeah.
We've discovered a lot of pastors just have kind of come to the end of themselves. And that's really not a bad place to be. You know, you get to this place where you're like, what we're doing is not working. And you know, and I know you have done this summit with what you do. We were trying before the pandemic, and you were at the conference where we talked about it, trying to get churches to update with some specific things that they are doing now, but they did it more out of a reaction than a proactive mentality.
Yes.
What do you see with pastors when it comes to that? Why does it take us almost like we almost have to go kicking and screaming into blessing?
Well, I know in my own heart, I struggle with that. Like it's so easy to believe Satan's lies. It's so easy. And I hate admitting that it's easy, but it is. And you're right, Dale, when you say proactive, like we have to proactively every day. My dad always says, you know, put on the armor, and he's referring to Ephesians chapter 6. Like we have to proactively fight because this is a war. And so often we get lulled into thinking that we're not at war in a spiritual sense. Right. And so, yeah, I think this is awakening the fact that there is a spiritual war. And quite honestly, I think one of the ways Satan has been winning is convincing us that we're competing against each other, that somehow we're not on the same team, somehow that we don't need each other. And I love what Ed Stetzer says when he's like, you know, before COVID, collaboration was a luxury. Now it is a necessity. So again, I just see God's hand in it where literally, I mean, even in our branding, like before COVID hit, we launched this thing called the Northeast Collaborative. And that's literally the heartbeat of connecting with other leaders in a synergistic way to where we not only succeed in terms of numbers or stats or, you know, it's not about that, but it's really about being healthy. So what we try to help churches and pastors understand what a healthy church should be and is. And we have a little dance and no show, grow, flow, sow. And I can't show you the dance because, you know, it's a podcast, but anyway, we'll have to do that in a video sometime.
It'll be on YouTube. So if you want to do the dance,
it's just motions. You know, you take your fingers, point to the head, then you put your palms up for show, then you show the guns for grow, then you do this for flow. And then the dancing is, see, I come from a Baptist background. So I'm like, you know, dancing wasn't ever a big deal. So I love getting Baptists to dance. So the sow is where you really like get the hips shaking and you do all this. So no flow, growth, flow, or no show. I bet
all the pastors
grow,
in the room are so comfortable with that.
Yeah, they love that.
Yeah, I know they do.
But really holistic health, I think is difficult. And in all seriousness, I think so many churches, they'll be like, well, let's only focus on this one area. And that's fine. I mean, I think every church has their strengths and weaknesses, but when you look at, I believe, God's vision for the church, I think he has a vision of what I call holistic health, where we actually, and this is the beauty of it, we need each other. And we've done such a bad job. We're not holistically healthy because we've been, you know, kicking out different people who disagree with us. So like a lot of churches tend to take on the personality of their pastors, and that's not necessarily wrong. But I think part of the issue is we don't do a good job of including everyone and the differences and the beauty of that diversity. And we've also kicked out. So with the APEST model from Ephesians 4, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, teachers, most churches really only accept leaders who are shepherd teachers. But the apostles, evangelists, and prophets, what they have to do? They had to go out and start other ministries outside of local churches because local churches have kind of said, well, shepherd teachers, like those are pretty much the main ones we want, but we really need all five. And within the church, like one of the things here at Grace Christian Fellowship that I love is they have Stephen Ministry. I don't know if you've ever heard of Stephen Ministry, but it's this awesome mobilizing of lay leaders to not necessarily be counselors, but to basically provide care, spiritual care for people. For me, like I can provide spiritual care, but my version of counseling tends to be, stop it.
Yeah, get over
Like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
here's
Like
step
stop.
one, two, three. All right, get over it. Now
Stop it.
go on. Yeah, you're done.
But what that means is, so like I'm extremely extroverted. As I've come into Grace Christian Fellowship, I've found that my predecessor was extremely introverted. And so Grace Christian Fellowship is filled with primarily currently introverts. And what's amazing about the beauty of it is we're having some fun times learning each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's amazing is like introverts need other introverts to serve them and to love them and to, care for them. And a guy like me can really freak introverts out. But if we have a vision that goes, no, the church is for both introverts and extroverts. I may be an extroverted leader, but I've got to cultivate and pour into the introverts so that they can serve introverts. And it's not only a personality differences, it's ages, right? Like some churches are like, well, we're a young church or we're an old church. And it's like, no, we need to be multi-generational. We need to be multi-ethnic. We need to be multi-personality. Like that's really the design, because the world needs to look at the church and go, why are you all hanging out? You guys shouldn't be hanging out with each other. What's the reason? And we all go, it's Jesus Christ and his Holy Spirit in us.
We discovered that.
Go
Go ahead, Carly.
When you're talking about, getting a church to a healthy point, what are, some, I want to say action steps or tips that you would have for maybe a pastor who's listening that says, we're just not healthy right now. Like, what can we do?
Well,
is that a big question?
It is a very big question.
Big question, yes.
One of the things I would say that is one of the things I've found helpful, and I've encouraged a ton of churches to do this, is to get outside eyes, get fresh eyes, because when you have been ingrained in a culture for so long, a bunch of leaders have talked about this, but like you just get accustomed to what is, and you're not able to see the unhealthy things. And I think that's part of why, even in my transition, part of what's been interesting is I'm kind of coming in and I'm going, okay, and I'm trying to reaffirm the strengths. So I've only been here 7 months. So like, I'm literally just getting my feet wet, and I'm trying to reaffirm, okay, here's where GCF is like crushing it and so healthy. But here are some things where I think we could really take next steps in. But the reason I think that I'm able to see some of that is because I'm new. Like I've got fresh eyes. For some churches and pastors who've been there for a long time, it can be helpful to bring in a 95 Network or Northeast Collaborative or, other great consultants. There's so many out there. Not all of them are great. Some are good, some aren't. And we Dale and I know some that we'd love to recommend if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, where do I go for that? We'd love to connect those dots for you. But I would say that's one practical step. Theologically, I could go a lot of directions with that question, but that is a very good question.
You love quotes, so I want to give you a quote. Carly and I had a conversation recently with Michael Moore, and he said he was talking about having outside eyes come in. He says, and here's this quote: "If you want to know what water tastes like, don't ask a fish."
Yes, he did say that.
That is one of the best quotes I've ever heard.
That's brilliant.
Because you do need outside eyes, because we just tend to gravitate toward our comfort. And so talk to me a little bit about what you talked about the introverts. And one of the things we've discovered a positive from online church and having to connect online during the pandemic, especially in its high point, was we've discovered through some other friends of ours that noticed this too. It seems that the introverts are more engaged when they can do online. Do you guys focus on online at all, or where are you at on that?
I think it depends on your context. I really like I forget who coined this, but the phygital mentality, like the hybrid thing, physical and digital. I think
we focus on.
It's very important because that's where people are. People are online, right? Like, is it optimal? No. Is it, I think, our go-to, like our first priority? No, but people are there. So I think a blend and a hybrid is really good. Here in Cortland, I've had to contextualize a lot because we were very, digital space was very important to us in an urban context. Out here in a more rural setting, it's okay. This is a true story. Before I came, my predecessor, one of the staff members here was his son, and his son decided that he was not going to take this church. He was going to find a new ministry, and he's transitioned to a church that is just super blessed by him. But I knew that going into it. So I knew that he was going to transition. So he puts his house up for sale, and my wife, Joy, looks on Facebook and she goes, "Oh my gosh, they put their house up for sale on Facebook. Did you know that?" And we hadn't told the church yet. So I go to him the next day and I say, "Bro," I'm like, "you put your house up for sale on Facebook." I was like, "We haven't told the church yet." He's like, "Oh, they won't see." I'm like, "Dude, you're joking with me, right?" Like, I did not believe him at all. No joke, guys. I'm not lying. People came up to me and they said, "Hey, we saw that the pastor's leaving," but it was because they saw the physical sign in the front yard. Had nothing to do with Facebook. He was dead right the whole time. I was blown away by that. So here we do have, so like we just went through a whole rebranding, new website and everything. Like I said, like, this is important. Like, we need to make sure our digital front door is solid.
Mm-hmm.
But depending on where you're at, I think you need to gauge. It's not one size fits all in terms of how much you put into online. Yeah, you've got to know your context. But I love what Craig Groeschel said. I know I'm just throwing out all these quotes, but like he said, "I highly doubt that Jesus would say, 'Go into all the world and, make disciples and share the gospel,' but not online." like he's like, I just don't see Jesus saying that. And I agree with him. Like, we've got to engage both. But I will tell you, I think what people are craving more than anything now is personal, is live, in person. And I think any strategy that would say we're going to replace personal and in-person with digital completely, I don't think that's wise. And I don't think that's healthy, because honestly, I mean, all the stats of what dopamine is doing to our brains, of what our phones are, what social media is doing. I mean, just watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, and it's a crash course in how dangerous this stuff is. I think there's going to be, especially with our kids, like Gen Alpha, I think there's going to be a massive pushback the other direction, anti-technology, because it's just so overwhelming what it's doing. I'm not saying it'll go away. What I'm saying is we're going to feel the effects with our kids' generation, and they're going to do what other generations have done in reaction to, I mean, it's all cyclical. But no, I think online is important, and we do have a digital presence, but in our context, in a rural setting, we're not putting nearly as much as I did when I was in an urban setting.
I mean, the reality is you've got to know your context. You got to know where your church is. And you've got to, what we say is it's not either or, it's both and. You've got to have a both and approach going forward, because it's still a place where you connect with the most new people.
You do. I say, the way I describe it is it's more of a draw in rather than the destination, right? Like, it's a draw, not the destination. So, I remember years ago, this is long before COVID, we were going to make the switch to actually doing online streaming years before COVID. And I remember one of our pastors at Restored going, "I just don't know. Like, are people just going to stay home in their pajamas and never connect in community? Because community is not just something, like, groups are not something we do. It's not bonus or extra credit. It's actually who we are as a church, because we started as a group, as groups." So we're like, well, we don't know. Let's try it. So what we found is, after we did live streaming for a few months, people were coming in person because of the stream. It was a huge draw for them to come in person. And so I think that's the wisest way to use technology, is to use it as a vehicle or a draw rather than the destination. Because I got to tell you that I have some very real, serious concerns about what I call YouTube Christianity. And I am seeing it everywhere, and it is hurting collaboration a lot. It's pitting pastors against each other. It's helping. It's feeding this thing in pastors, and not just pastors, but I think a lot of leaders, of just the jealousy, the insecurity, the what is success, because I can't measure up to whoever the big names are, right? All these pastors that have all these followers and this huge online presence. And that's not God's definition of success. I think those pastors that have that, God bless them, man. Like, go for it. Reach as many people for Jesus as you can. But when everything is centered in online space, I think it's really unhealthy for not only pastors and leaders, but I think it's also unhealthy for church members, because they're not. A lot of people are saying, "I'm watching a sermon, and and that's it. They're never building bridges or relationships with people in their life who can help them follow Jesus. And without community, I don't think we're going to be spiritually healthy.
We are seeing our stadiums full. We're seeing our malls full, concerts, everything in society pretty much is going back to normal, but the church. Why?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't think that we've been healthy. Honestly, I don't think the American church has been healthy. I think our forms have been very unbiblical. And what I mean by that is it's not that we aren't doing biblical things. I think the whole model that we have of the weekly event and measuring success by B3, butts, buildings, budgets. If we have measured success like that, and we measure how many people are just watching something happen on a stage once a week, that was never God's design. If you go to Northeast Collaborative's website, you'll see not only the know, show, grow, flow, sow, but just a breakdown, a paragraph that we actually worked on for over a year with multiple leaders, multiple pastors, of what a healthy church is. And when you aim for what I believe God defines as a healthy church, it takes time. It's messy. I mean, I'm kind of revamping some of our membership stuff here at the church. And I know membership is a very controversial thing, but one of the first things I say is this isn't biblical. It's helpful. And I want this to be a vehicle for your discipleship. So I'm telling all of you, we had 26 people interested. And I said, all right, gang, here's the deal. I'm glad that you're all interested, but literally, if you become a member, what you are doing is you are intentionally signing up for people to be much more in your business about following Jesus. That is not easy. That is messy. And I just want you to know that, like, we care about you, but sometimes that care and that love doesn't feel good because our society has been telling us if it feels bad, then it is bad. But when you have unhealthy stuff in your life, a doctor isn't bad for saying, hey, we might need to cut that out of you, right? A doctor is loving when he does that, but that's something that I think we've avoided a lot in the American church. We've avoided the messiness, the long term. We've wanted quicker, faster, bigger, and that has been deemed, in our estimation, better. But I don't think it has.
We can actually pin that back with what you said earlier. I always say this. There's this book called the Bible. There's a guy named Jesus that started something called the church, and through his friend Paul in Ephesians 4, he told us exactly how to do it. He says, I'm going to give you apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers to equip saints to do ministry. And then the next 4 verses teach you that you're going to have maturity, stability, integrity, and community. So those next 4 verses tell you what will happen if we do this. We don't do this. So this in there, we find the verse that says we can speak the truth in love. You can't do that in most churches. If you speak the truth in love, one of 2 things happen. Either one, they get mad and get offended because you hurt their feelings, or they get devastated. But the reality is a leader in a church, our calling is to equip saints, not to. We were never called to get converts. We were called to create disciples. And I think we can't see this now, but I believe one day we'll look back with more of just an overview of this season we're in, and we'll call it, it's not the great resignation. I think it's the great correction, because we were never going to, on our own, make the changes we needed to make.
Right. And that's where I think God's getting our attention. So, another cool story, member of the church comes in. He's like, hey, Pastor Dan, I just want to spit back to you what I think, like, the direction we're heading. Can I just spit it back to you and see if I'm right? And I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, this is the test, right? He's like, so I'm a police officer. So the future of our church is that I take my faith into my police officering and I influence them and love them and share Jesus with them. And that's where we're heading as a church, right? I said, yes.
And that's
thank
foreign,
God.
Right? That's foreign.
I was like,
that's
man,
great though.
But it's a big shift because we have had this professionalization. I think churches have also just we have not cared enough about people who are still far from God. I think we have wanted to just feel good about ourselves and our religious bubbles. And then finally, I think people are not coming back to church because they've seen the turf wars and they're going, God's kingdom shouldn't have any turf wars, but y'all are having a ton of them. So if you guys can't get along with each other, why would I buy into this Jesus thing? Like, if it's really real, you guys should be able to understand God's kingdom has no turf wars. So I've been, we pray for a different church from stage every single Sunday. Every Sunday we say the name of a local church, not just like, church is 30 hours away, like literally church is 3 minutes away. Joy and I have them over to our home and we put pictures up online and we promote their church. We're like, hey, this is Pastor so-and-so, man, they are reaching people for Jesus. And like, we want to do everything we can to break down these competitive, I believe, satanic lies we've bought that we are against each other. Now, I do believe there are obviously times where we need to take tough stands on truth, right? Like Jesus is God. The Bible is the word of God. And yes, there are some churches that do not believe those things and teach the opposite. And people do need to leave those churches. And I have no problem saying that because those are hills to die on. The problem is, guys, how many hills have we created that we think we should die on that really they're not primary.
They don't matter.
They're not primary. No.
Well, going forward in the Northeast and seeing what you're seeing and, just kind of being in the thick of it, what gives you hope for the area that you're serving right now? Oh
man, I'm so glad you asked that. One of our teams here at GCF, we did this thing called Grace Bomb. Another one of our friends, Pat Linnell, you guys did an interview.
Partner.
Yep. He's a strategic partner, 95 Network. She and her friends are at a public school here in our region. And they just spent hours and hours writing, I think over 200 handwritten notes. And they weren't allowed to put Grace Bomb cards in there. They tried as hard as they could, but they weren't allowed. But they just blessed all of their fellow students and let them know that they care about them and that they hope that they're doing well. And basically just they couldn't articulate the gospel like in depth, but just being so selfless that way. Like I am seeing Gen Z get excited about serving. I see Gen Z getting excited about the truth. And they're hungry for it. We're doing a processing time with Sean McDowell this week. And man, like leaders like him and others, like they're helping fuel a movement of younger folks who are really passionate about the right things and about the essential things, not secondary things. So that gives me hope. And then finally, with our churches in NAC, just the faithfulness, the perseverance, the endurance. I mean, I know Barna just came out with a stat, 2 out of every 5 pastors are considering quitting. And, that's a very real struggle. I've been there before many times, but like,
I think that's low. Actually, I think it's lower. What I'm seeing.
It may be higher than that.
It's got to be 3 out of 5 right now. Maybe 4. I mean, from what we're seeing, but anyway, keep on.
Oh, it's brutal. I mean, being a pastor today is very hard. A lot of other fields are too, but pastoring is just crazy right now. And I'm seeing pastors just stick with the stuff. It is amazing to me how persevering our pastors are in some of the most challenging churches and some of the most like non-sexy, non-attractive areas, right? And they're not doing the whole grass is greener thing. They're going, I'm going to love the people God has called me to love. I'm going to, bloom where I'm planted. And it is just filling me with courage on the days where I don't feel like continuing on.
That's great.
We, because we have done some things in the Northeast. If you have not been in the Northeast or studied it, to find a Bible believing church, it's really it's scary to realize how far apart in different areas that there's churches, but actual Bible believing, teaching the gospel churches, they're scarce. And so I guess what I think about is if God continues to raise up pastors like you just described, there's hope for a move of God, because that's all we got. I know in that particular demographic and geography, there's a lot of really smart people and they, and value smarts, and they value education and everything. Sometimes we get so smart, we're not too smart at all. And I think we're at a place where we're desperate for God. And I believe, are you seeing that with people there?
Yes and no. I mean, there's still a lot of antagonism, and I think people are running a lot. You bring up the intellectual side of things. I think in the Northeast, people use those as excuses because at the end of the day, there are credible answers for Christianity.
Mhm.
And yes, the church we as pastors have not done a good job of equipping the body to be able to answer like questions. First of all, to just welcome them. I think sometimes the cultures in our churches, we don't even welcome questions. But then when you get to that point, you have to be able to respond. And it's not that you have to have a PhD, but 1 Peter 3:15, right? Be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you. And so we need to do a better job of that. That's part of why I love like Sean McDowell and so many of these other great apologists who are not only brilliant in and of themselves, but they can really break it down for, us normal people who like, it's hard for us to get our head around some of these tougher questions. And yeah, I think that that is encouraging to see, again, more of that coming in the Northeast where the answers are coming, but people's responses, I mean, it's just like with Paul at Mars Hill. So at the end of his Mars Hill sermon, it's the same as it is today. Some believed and they came to Christ, but the majority said no. And that was one of the most winsome sermons ever, right? Like, yeah.
Hey,
it's just the reality.
Paul, you're not going to listen to anybody.
No, I mean, that sermon is just expert level. And he contextual. I mean, there's so much you could go. I mean, so much about Acts 17 and what he does there. But the response was pretty negative. And guess what? Jesus himself was rejected by so many people. And I think we missed that. We missed that the early, sometimes we talk about the early church, like, oh, if we could just get back to the early church. It's like, have you read the Bible? Like, have you read the New Testament?
I don't think they read Acts.
Persecution.
The early church was so messed up, but
John was boiling oil.
Goodness.
Come on now.
I know, like even like the persecution, but also just the messiness of the unhealthiness of the early church. Like, I mean, even with our church, a restored church, man, God's blessed. Like I said, we had 147 baptisms. God's changed lives. But man, just a few years in, it was like we were already having we haven't always done it that way. Or, the mission drift of a lot of Christians coming. And, for church plants, sometimes that can be a really tough thing because you get a lot of Christians coming and you get a lot of different opinions. And we talk about the paradigm. I forget who all this comes from. This may come from Josh Howerton in Dallas, but it's the paradigm of God, church, me. What will bring most glory to God? What will help our church be healthiest? What are my thoughts and preferences? So that's part of what I'm walking GCF through is that's our priorities paradigm. And a lot of churches, it's flipped. It's me, church, God, but we got to flip that back. And that's exactly the struggle that the early church had. They had the paradigm all shift very soon after they would get planted. So yeah, we're struggling with all the same stuff. And yes, the majority of people, the fact is they will not receive the gospel. Like that's always been true. I hope that we have a third great awakening. I believe that we're primed for it. I think we're primed for it, but we also can't go into it with this thought of, man, because if you really get serious about evangelism, especially, it's like 3 steps forward, 2 steps back every single time. And some people, they need years, decades before they come to Christ. Other people, they need 9, 10, 12 conversations to actually come to that point. And for some people that you may answer with the best, most winsome intellectual argument, but really it's God who saves.
The Holy Spirit's got to draw them in. And
that's so hard for driven leaders like you and me, Dale, especially. And Carolee, I'm sure you're similar too. Like, it's like, man, I want people to know Jesus so bad, but I don't save. Only God can.
Well, speaking of encouragement like that God saves, what is a word of encouragement that you could give to pastors listening today?
We end every processing time with a short reminder, 1 Corinthians 15:58. Nothing we do for the Lord is ever in vain.
That is amazing.
That's a
I love
good way to wrap up today, man. Thank you so much for your passion and your friendship, and looking forward to being with you. I think, as you say, November the 5th is when we're there. I believe that's right.
Yeah. First Saturday in November. If you're in the Northeast, we have the Northeast Leadership Summit. This is a day that's interactive and it's designed for church members, lay leaders, volunteers, teens. It's not just for pastors and staff, although you're certainly welcome. Last year, we had over 260 come out in person. We're aiming for 500 this year. We've got space created for that. Chick-fil-A is catering box lunches. So if you like Chick-fil-A, well, Chick-fil-A there.
Well, that's the draw.
That's the draw right there. Dr. Crawford Loritz will do the main sessions on redefining success. And we want him to talk about both faithfulness and fruitfulness. But beyond the main sessions, we give you processing times to literally just huddle up with your teams. We have great breakouts from 95 Network and so many others, but it's a very interactive, very discussion, dialogue driven day to develop disciples in their next steps of influence for Jesus.
We'll certainly help promote that here too. So I'm
and we'll put the link to sign up in the show notes if there's a link. So
or get us the link when you can.
We will. Yeah. Dale, thank you for coming out. Carol Lee, you want to come up and enjoy the little bit of the Northeast?
Circling back around, that's my anniversary weekend, so I might be sitting in Bermuda. You never know.
Horseshoe Bay.
Thanks
Horseshoe Bay, Bermuda.
I did want to ask you this as we wrap it up. You said you've been to Toronto and Bermuda. Which beaches were the best?
Oh, man. Oh,
thank you again, Dan. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.